to another episode of the Veterinary AI Brief. My name is Dr. Adam Little. I'm one of your co-hosts alongside Dr. Aaron Massacre and Robert Sanchez. We have a really exciting episode today. One of the things that we've been particularly interested in exploring with our audience has been how veterinary professionals in their day-to-day lives are using AI tools to make their worlds, their cases, their work with their teams easier, smarter, and more impactful. And what has emerged is some really interesting stories and examples of how I want to say average veterinarians, but that's doing you a disservice, but rather like, let's say non-developers are beginning to, apply tools like Claude and Gemini and Notebook LM and Replit, et cetera, to be able to build tools in their own worlds. And we thought it would be really fun to bring a collection of these folks on to share about their background, their projects, and hopefully act as an inspiration to those of you who haven't quite been able to jump in and start building. And really kind of gets back to one of the themes that we're talking about quite often these days, which are as these tools themselves come down in costs, expand in capability, get more powerful, what can we do as domain experts to be able to build the solutions that we want to use, as opposed to the kind of traditional model of waiting for, a third-party vendor or PIMS provider to kind of come up with the perfect feature. So we have three veterinarians today, Dr. Sam Lewis, Dr. William Lane, and Dr. Carly Little, who are all going to share a bit of their perspectives. We're really kind of in listening mode, but we'll talk through their backgrounds, their projects, and some words of wisdom that we can have our audience deploy. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We have the advantage of having a couple of my former roommates and current roommates on the pod. So for those of you who've heard before, Aaron and I spent a lot of time at Texas A&M. Prior to that, Dr. Glenn Lane and I were roommates in the veterinary frat at OVC. So maybe we'll kick it off with him. Glenn, do you mind telling us a little bit about kind of your background, where you're practicing, and what kind of got you interested in starting to play around with these tools?
Sure. I'm a emergency and critical care specialist working out of Toronto at one of the specialty hospitals there. I started dabbling in 2024 with ChatGPT, and it just wasn't where I needed it to be for any impactful clinical work. And then kind of took a break for a bit and then kind of dove back in last summer. I think I came across some YouTube video about Notebook LM and then just really got in after that. It just really unlocked the power that AI had. And I think I initially started, I was listening to the AI Daily Brief, and they had like a list of like 5 things to get started in AI. And one of them was use a thinking model, like O3 at the time. Make an agent with N8N or something like that, vibe code something, and use an MCP server. And that's kind of where I started. It was like, okay, this is happening. This has potential. I think my son was born at that time, and I was like, this is going to be a big part of his life, and I'm not going to be the dad one-figure typing in the 90s. Like, I need to be on this. And then started playing around with it and figuring out what the capabilities were. So I started, built an agent in N8N. It was just super simple. I would telegram it using audio, my physical exams, and it would put it in a Google Doc for me, and I would just copy and paste them in. And then I kind of incrementally improved from there to build something much, much bigger. I've got like a full stack web app that uses LangChain, Deep Agents, SDK to kind of fire up multiple parallel researchers. Kind of how I use that clinically is I love to look up journal articles and textbooks, and I can be like, look, I need the latest research on this topic, and it just goes and cooks for me for a bit, and I come back and it gives me a like list of information that I need with AMA citations, and it searches PubMed, it looks at my uploaded documents. So I'm trying to just give it a task so it can do some work for me, because yeah, I'd love to crack open a textbook and go look at that, but I don't got time. I need something that's going to do that for me.
Awesome. Very cool. Like a couple of things that you mentioned there, this sort of like learning curve of maybe where the model's caught up to your ambition, and this ability to sort of tailor it to your individual needs I think, Sam, you use some of the same tooling for what you've been working on. Why don't you share a little bit about your background, where you're joining us from today, and where you've kind of focused your attention?
Yeah, when you were talking about Notebook LM, I was like, oh, I'm right there with you. I love using it that way. We also use that here in the hospital, and it's been fun seeing my doctors adopt to that. We've kind of building our own database of textbooks, AVMA consensus statement, JAVMA articles, and stuff like that. I am the founder and the medical director for Rogue Valley Veterinary Emergency, a weekend emergency clinic down in Southern Oregon. We opened in December of 2024 with a team of probably 8 team members that dropped to 6 in that first month. And it has been a wild ride ever since. So I remember thinking, what kind of craziness did I sign myself up for? But since then, we've expanded to 4 doctors, about 20 team members now. We are rapidly fulfilling a need where we have clients driving over 2.5 hours to get to us. So it's been great seeing the community really like what we do. We have some very unique features to our clinic. One of those being was we actually have an open floor model. And from my understanding, I think some of you guys are pretty familiar with that, especially if you're familiar with Vetch. The other thing that we do that's relatively unique to us too is we include diagnostics with our exam, and that has slowly continued growing as far as what we did. When we first did it, I was saying, oh, let's just include a fast scan with our exam. You know, it's such a small thing. I see a lot of doctors were just like, let's put the probe on us. You know, we're not going to charge a client for this. Let's just get a little look-see, see what's going on in here. And I just realized, like, why have that as a barrier? Let's just include it. And from there, it grew. And I was like, well, let's include some point of care diagnostics too. Let's get a pack cell volume. That's not going to cost me an arm and a leg to run on every patient we do. And it's now to the point that we include like 10 different diagnostics. We include IV catheter. We include sedation. We include pain management for these patients. We don't fight them if they come in. It's a hit by car. Oh, can I get $80 for pain medication? No, we just give it now. And it's really improved our efficiency. They immediately grab blood. We run those diagnostics, and boom, by the time I speak to the client, our blood's already spun down and ready to run for chemistry. So that's some of our model as far as our hospital here. That's also kind of, it's funny to see how it's grown and it's continued to grow, because now we've done that with our hospitalization levels. Instead of having these things like where we would charge every 12 hours for pain management or for Jackson Pratt management or NG2s, we just include them in the hospital levels. And we, I guess, charge appropriately for that. Makes it easier so I'm not constantly, oh, I got to stop this so I don't waste all my clients' funds. Let's just continue doing what the patient needs.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't mention how the AI kind of ties into that. So that's probably an important step for an AI veterinary brief, huh? Where that comes in is that as we continued to grow and we kept seeing more and more of the AI, we started seeing all these transcription softwares coming out there. I knew immediately off the bat, I wanted transcription for our phone calls. I wanted to be able to have that get into our medical notes. And then I was like, well, let's also have it help with the medical notes. Do I need to have every part of the conversation? And so we have kind of a unique approach on how we get our medical records done. We reverse engineer them from what was done in a hospital. So we can take a incomplete medical note that's missing assessments, planned procedures, and based on the treatments that the patient received, reverse engineer what the recommendations and what the client elected to do. And so that has continued to grow, and we've continued to add more tools into the hospital from that, from building digital urgent care boards to having in-clinic resources like our Notebook LM. And like I said, it's been fun seeing the doctors adopt the AI very quickly.
That's awesome. Carly, I know you're really big into communication and mentorship. How did you get to that point, and how did you get to using AI for those purposes? Some background would be awesome.
Well, you know what, as Adam's most recent roommate, I will take that honor lightly. For anyone who doesn't know, Adam is my husband. So you can imagine our talks around the dinner table are geared to what the latest language model is and how he hacked some code to do some new thing for him and how Claude's his new boyfriend. So Yeah, I'm a veterinarian, general practice veterinarian out of Vancouver, BC. And I actually was in the class with Aaron's wife, Jody, who's a dear friend of mine as well. So it all kind of comes back together. I was a practice owner in 2018 to 2022, and I saw a big need for bringing the skills that we learned in our Art of Vet Med Lab communication training into general practice. I found a lot of our new team members, that was an area that they really could improve upon. And if there was an opportunity for us to do that in the hospital, I wanted to do it. So at OVC, they've actually got like the two-way mirrors, and your whole practice group is pressed against the glass, and they're writing down the quotes that you said. And it might bring kind of like a pinch of like uncomfortableness into that experience, but it certainly teaches you a lot about your actual communication in clinic. And so I tried to recreate that in our hospital. And so before my last mat leave, with our beautiful daughter, I'd actually sit on the ground. I'd like, don't worry about me. I'm just here writing notes, because one of the things that really kind of drove home for us is getting those exact transcripts of like what people were saying when they did their signposting, when they asked an open-ended question, was so important to that kind of knowledge loop. And so I would actually just sit there and write notes as they were talking. And I would then go over those things with our new vets. And then coming back off of mat leave, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, all of our vets have COVID, and not being too much of a plug here for Aaron, but it's been a game changer. So now they've got incredible medical records, and how can I take this to the next level and actually use it for mentorship and coaching? So I developed something called Brown's Vet, in which you can upload a transcript either from an AI scribe or actually just from a voice to note on your phone, and copy and paste that in there, and it provides framework feedback and areas of suggestion, real quotes pulled out of their transcripts, in order to improve communication skills and ultimately drive for job satisfaction and throughout the entire team. So that's what I built. To be fair, originally I had gone to Adam and been like, hey, I've got this great idea. Can you build this for me? And like any annoying husband, he said, hey, honey, here's a free course I found on X for you to build on Lovable, and you should build it yourself. I went out and did that, and a couple sleepless nights, because once I started, I was like, oh my gosh, I understand why he's so excited about this, and started building myself, and haven't looked back. It's a race to the tech in our household right now, but no, it's been a good resource to bounce ideas off of, because obviously things are changing very, very quickly, and I know a lot in my own kind of lane in the clinic, but it's been really cool to figure out what else is out there and what capabilities are out there to help support us.
Very cool. Appreciate that. And I'm glad the amount of people I've said, try this course or just like watch this YouTube video to get started, and they never do. You do need people that kind of have that like ambition and that agency to kind of start to learn a new skill themselves. I mean, maybe what we could do is, go a little bit into each one of your projects in a bit more depth. And I think one of the things to call out is that for some of the platforms that you all are building people might have never heard of them before. And so, Glenn, you were sort of talking about Notebook LM. Would love to hear a little bit more about how you've kind of configured your setup, why you chose that platform, what is it, how do people use it, and whatever you're willing to share would be great.
Sure. For starters, stop watching YouTube videos. Just put them into Notebook LM, and it'll be so much faster. You don't have to wait for any ads. Like, it's awesome. That's kind of, I started my journey with Notebook LM, like just the other day. Like, I still use it all the time. Like the other day I had a lab reports, like a histopathology report, and I was like, this is not my area of expertise. I'm not really sure exactly what to make of this. So like I throw the report in there, and I throw in the JVIM guidelines for interpreting that for this disease. And I'm just like asking it, like, how do I interpret this? How do I make sense of this? What does this mean? And I use it for also summarizing medical records and things like that. It's been helpful for that. So I kind of started with that and then kind of branched off from there. I kind of went to N8N. So N8N, you can visually make a workflow. So something is the trigger, whether that's like pressing a button, sending a message, receiving an email, adding a file to a folder. Something is the trigger, then that trigger then leads to whatever you want it to do. You can parse things, process things, send it through an AI. So the very first thing was just Telegram trigger, which is a free messaging app, then goes to the OpenAI audio to text, And then that went to like a Google Doc. And that's kind of where I first started. And then I expanded that out to include a database. So I used a Postgres database with, to do retrieval augmented generation, which is where you take a document, you chunk that document into a bunch of little pieces, and then a special AI called an embedding model gives a coordinate on a graph for each one of those pieces. So I started doing that kind of with articles and textbooks from my own library. And then I got to a point where I could just send a text message to Telegram being like, hey, what's the dose for this? Research that. And it gives me back a chunk directly from one of my resources so that on the go I could have access to that. And kind of decided that that was good. And that was useful, but only I could use it. So I was like, well, why don't I make like a web app that I could then give to my coworkers so that they could also use it and get benefit from it. And so that led me to Replit. So I worked on Replit for a little bit and made kind of the first version of the web app there. And it was pretty rudimentary in terms of software developments. You tell the AI what to do, and it goes and it does stuff. It's definitely very impressive the way it works. And they migrated from like their second version to their third version with sub agents kind of around when I was first working with it. And then they were able to kind of do the deployment and the database and all that stuff was handled as well. So like services like Replit and Lovable are really good for that. And Google has like half a dozen too, where you can just go and start typing and get something out of it as a kind of good first step. And they'll handle a lot of the back end stuff like deployment and databases and things like that to kind of make it easy. After I did that for a while, there were some limitations to it. It's a subscription service. I kind of wanted something that had a bit more flexibility and pay as you go. So then I decided to try out Cursor next. So I used GitHub and took my app off Replit and then figured out how GitHub works and then put it onto Cursor. And then I figured out how Docker works, which is where you take your app that's working on your computer and you make it work on in these containers. And then the container can just go anywhere and work so that if it works on your system but not somewhere else, like you have a way to control against that. So I figured out how that worked. I worked on Cursor for a while. That's when Opus 4.5 came out, and that was huge. Like 4.5 was really, really good. We were able to plan things out in a lot more detail and get execution right away, where it was a very incremental, I felt, before that, even with some of the previous models that were quite good. I did try anti-gravity for a little bit. It was fine. Like, the best thing about it is it's got good Opus usage. Otherwise, I kind of liked Cursor a bit better. And then one of the big things that helped me out was I was listening to Lenny's podcast, and they had a project manager named Zevi Arnovitz on, and he was talking about his setup of, he was a project manager at Meta, but non-coder. And he had like a Claude Code terminal inside of Cursor and had like a setup of all of these different custom commands, sub-agents, rules, hooks, permissions, all of these different setup pieces, which are just so important for getting a good outcome when you're starting to dive into these projects. So my current setup is kind of based off of that. I have a Claude project setup that's like my chief technical officer or project manager. The Claude project makes the prompts. So I don't type into Claude Code anymore. I get an AI to make the prompt to tell Claude Code what to do. And then I have that whole setup inside of Cursor. So I go and I start off by exploring the code base for an issue. I plan out what we want to change. And then I execute it. And then I run a code review in Claude Code. And then I run a code review within Cursor using Codex or 5.4 GPT to kind of get a couple different models there. So you get the kind of the benefits of the different models. And the GPT 5.4 is fantastic for finding bugs, and Claude Code is just great for kind of putting it all together. And then I do that with the Docker, and then it's all on the Google Cloud platform now. And that's kind of how I got here.
Well, that's super interesting. There are a few things I'd love to unpack for our audience here.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
No. That was perfect. And, plenty of what you said rings true with me. We definitely did see a phase shift in December with Opus 4.5. I mean, that's when things really started getting nuts, because it started to go from, you can quote unquote vibe code these kind of like prototypes, to you can build production level systems with AI. Like you could trust the models as long as you could define the why and the what, the AI could figure out the how. And what I'd love to unpack for our audience a little bit here, you seem remarkably technical, which is phenomenal. I think we have a lot of listeners who aren't, who are, executives of very high-powered organizations, but maybe haven't ever opened terminal before, or veterinarians who, kind of clinicians at the top of their game, but who probably have never heard of Postgres, right? And so, I'm a non-technical founder trying to very quickly become technical, at least in agentic engineering. But, one thing that I found through this process, as I'm chiming in from my phone, because I'm quickly outgrowing even a 2025 MacBook Pro because of the level of agent orchestration that I'm now throwing at my computer. What I is, you don't need to know what Postgres is in order to use it, right? Like what you start just kind of defining specifically what you need, like what problem you need solved. And then it's this really cool iterative process where the agent really does the how, the heavy lifting there. And so what I'd love to make crystal clear for our audience is maybe like, one, what did the learning curve look like for you? Like, what did you find difficult? What did you find empowering? And two, like, what was the time in like the specifics between you starting to play around with these systems and then the first moment of like, holy shit, this is actually something valuable that I wouldn't want to live without in my own clinical workflow?
Yeah. You 100% don't need to know all the technical details. Like when I want to build a new feature, I'll go to Notebook LM and I'll be like, research best practices for doing this kind of thing. Or like recently I was upgrading kind of a case context feature, and it was like research how OpenClaw uses markdown files in order to maintain context and have that discoverable context. And so you use that to tell you like all the technical details. You take those technical details and you go to my Claude project, and I'm like, hey, like, one, give me the prompt for Notebook LM to find what I need to make this thing happen. Two, give me prompts to extract that information from Notebook LM so that I have all that context here. And then from that planning part, we're going to take all of that and throw it into Claude Code to actually plan it out and build it. So you don't have to know any of that stuff. Like the AI knows how to do it. Like all you need to know is what you want to build, and one, plan. Like if you go to Claude Code and you're like, do a thing, it'll do a thing, but it won't work, or it'll work, but not in the way you want it to work.
That's such a great point, William. And one actionable takeaway that I think is, maybe listening to you, maybe something that you've done, and I think our listeners could do as well. You don't want to jump right into building something with Claude Code. It's going to build something generic, not suited for you. Now, what you said is really interesting. It sounds like you've kind of outsourced the planning to Claude and the prompting. One thing that I've found to be really helpful is I might not know exactly what the quote unquote spec is, right? We're hearing all this terminology around spec driven design now, because the way that you can frame something in natural language is determinant of like what you get downstream from that. Now, part of the problem though, which it sounds like you're speaking of, is like, well, how do you actually get to that point, right? How do you get to the point where you have a good enough deep, nuanced enough understanding of the actual problem you're trying to solve? One quick and dirty thing that you can do is tell Claude, interview me. Like, hey, here's this thing that I'm wondering about. I have a feeling I could build something valuable, but I don't have it clear in my head, right now. I want this to feel like a human to human conversation. I don't want us to stop until we really get to the kind of the depth of the true problem. And have a falsifiable hypothesis that we can test and set up this experiment. And your job is to interview me until we get there. So super interesting. I'd love to make sure we also get to our, other guests and kind of hear about the, what it is fundamentally that you're building, what the maybe learning curve was like for you, so our audience can see like this actually isn't that difficult. Literally anybody can do it. Cloud Code, Replit, like all these apps are really quickly scaling in capabilities. So Sam, I would love to hear what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, and I'd love to show you too. So I'll start a little bit with, I think that we can probably go over the records a little bit. That's not too hard to show you. It's probably a place that many doctors start using AI for, is you're kind of working on records and you're like, oh God, I want something to help me. And I'm sure this was probably much more relevant in 2024 when there was a lot less transcription apps and stuff that were out there. But people were probably taking their records and throwing it into AIs and saying like, hey, help me make a medical note. And so what I started doing was I really started taking those medical notes and downloading the incomplete record and starting to run them through prompts to try and get what I was talking about. So it took a lot of variations before I started getting it to the point that I really felt like the models were looking good. And what was nice about it was once they started producing these records for us, I started having my team help with uploading the records. And it's similar to what I've seen in other hospitals where you'll have technicians help write these medical records, but oftentimes they don't know how to write a record, or they kind of have too much shorthand. It doesn't produce the kind of record that you want to see. Hopefully you guys are able to see my screen here as I've uploaded it into this tool that our team uses. Just giving
this is in you're using like typingmind.com. Is that like a wrapper that allows you to kind of models?
Exactly. Yeah. What I discovered was that a single subscription was becoming really hard for my team to use because we had so many users and we were getting flagged for having multi-user accounts. So eventually I said, okay, I have to figure out a better way of doing this than having a single subscription used by my whole team. And that's how I ended up getting to this system. But what you can see here on the screen is that I've made the prompt give me several kind of steps asking me, hey, what happened here? What happened here? What did you recommend? And it looks over the chart to kind of go through this. It then will ask you some follow-up questions and make sure the record looks like you want. Here we're saying that the client, which is my own dog, was hospitalized. And you can see here it's summarizing all the diagnostics, all the physical findings that were input into the chart, and producing the assessment for this patient. Following which it's going to go through and then generate the plan, where it shows you kind of what was discussed, followed by your recommendations and elected treatments by the owner. I don't think you have to be a crazy tech person to be able to do these things. I agree with what you guys are saying. And I've listened to some of your podcasts before now, and I really agree with one thing that stands true to me. Being able to be descriptive, to give it a logic, to say, this is what I want, but it's not good enough to say that I want a medical record. You need to say, I want a medical record that can be presentable to a client, that can show a client what was offered and what was chosen by a patient, to make sure it is not creating any kind of mistakes or hallucinations. It's about being specific. And I think that the more you practice and play with it, the more you will get used to being specific with it. But I think at this point, a lot of people have gotten the practice of playing with these prompts and doing these kind of things. So I'll show you the other tools where I kind of vibe coded, which is a fun way of saying no code app generation. And that's kind of where we've been taking a lot of our stuff to. So one of the things that...
Which is really quick, because when you're pulling this up, there's a couple of interesting kind of themes between you and Glenn's work. I think one of them is, as you've moved from kind of these personal assistants to something that's more team-wide, you've had to update kind of your thinking, the platform. You've had to take into consideration things like costs. And in many cases, it sounds like you both have almost rebuilt the experience based on the new requirements or the new needs as you've evolved things. So that I thought was really interesting. The other part too is when you were going through that example, there's clearly so much interaction between you, the user, and the model. And I think that's also something that we see quite a bit, where people are sort of looking at these things and saying, okay, when are they going to stop hallucinating, or when are they going to just kind of spit out the right answer? But what you're seeing in the example, and Glenn, with what Glenn was sharing, is this level of kind of collaboration between you and these models to arrive at that right output for that right time. And oftentimes it is the veterinarian or the veterinary team member who knows what they're looking for. And so it sounds like the goal isn't to sort of eliminate the collaboration or just get the black box to spell out the right answer even better. It's actually to create the opportunity to clarify very specifically what you're looking for and have the AI kind of proactively say, are you sure you want it like this? This is a contraindication here, like giving it the ability to give you visibility so that you as a veterinarian, much like if it was a technician that had a complicated case, it's kind of coming back to you to update you on its progress or checking. I just thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe is a little bit different than how people think about how these tools are going to get to. It's actually, maybe in some cases taking more time and having more collaboration and understanding your context more, as opposed to, one-shotting your entire life and you kind of just reacting and saying, okay, if this is right or wrong, there's no middle ground.
I think that's a really good point that you pointed out there. And it's funny because when we first did this, I started having my support team put in these prompts for us and get these so we could review them, make us more efficient, get through cases better. But then what I found was my doctors were like, no, I don't want you doing this. I want to do it. And the reason why was because my support team would go in there and they would say, what was the client complaint? Vomiting of 2-day duration. But when the doctor did it, we could say, we're worried about gastroenteritis with suspected pancreatitis. And the outputs generated, because the quality of the input is becoming improved, becomes so much stronger. And the record becomes so much more comprehensive. It reflects what happened better. And so it's funny, when we started having a support team help with these things, it's now transitioned to now the doctors want to do all of it, including writing the discharges and things like that, which I think is great. And I think it's helped them quite a bit be more efficient with it. And it comes back to having customized medical notes for clients. It's no longer just templates, but it's really specific to their patient, their particular problem. If dental disease was mentioned, it gives you parts where you can cover with preventative care areas. And you can be like, yeah, not the main concern, but you should get this followed up with your primary vet. So I think that's a powerful way of interacting with AI.
So I went ahead here.
Yeah. So this is Tatiana. Tatiana's named this after my cat, who's a needy bitch. Forgive my language. So I have this actually as a progression of things. So when I first was coming up with this issue, it was to solve a really practical problem that we had in the clinic. I noticed that 50% of the patients were only contributing, 20% of our patients were contributing over 80 or 50% of the revenue. There was that 80-20 thing. And we noticed that a very small population of clients were really generating the majority of the revenue for the hospital. And I looked harder at it. And of course, it's the hit by cars, it's the foreign bodies, it's the hospitalizations, it's all these trauma cases. But our wait times were getting bigger and bigger because we were seeing all these urgent care cases. And the urgent care cases, they need to be seen, but there was no flow. There was no control for them. They were waiting. And we were starting to get to the point where we might have to divert a case. Well, we're diverting the most important cases who need the most immediate care. And that's not a good strategy. So we came up with the urgent care board. The urgent care board was originally just an Excel document where we would write down patients who needed to be called back to bring into the hospital waiting lists. I'm sure every hospital has seen that. But I was able to, using a tool called Base 44, a app writing LLM, create an urgent care. And what was really cool was I used tools like Claude and ChatGPT to generate a prompt to then create an app inside these tools. So it's combining multiple AI tools to be able to produce a good quality. And what's nice about that too is many of these app writing LLM groups, they're charging by the token. Every time you generate something, it's called a token. And it's something where if I kept writing this inside the tool, I'd be spending a ton of money. Instead, I used my subscriptions to generate the majority of the work, and then I augmented it through the Base 44 from there. So you can see here, this is our check-in process. The tool has a whole waiting time. It shows a live updating there so clients can look at this page. And what I've seen is that clients sit on this page. We get so many views when I look at our website analytics. They look at this page and they look at our costs because they want to see how much this stuff costs before they come into the practice. And so it really helps with the efficiency. They know what to expect when they come into the hospital. My team loves this tool. It's greatly improved. You can see there's even a queue where the patient's name is sitting there, and they can see each step that they are as they go through this. And this was all generated through the base 44, just getting specific and more specific and more specific to generate what we wanted. We have an ER check-in, urgent check-in, and this basically will change the acknowledgments that the client has to have. We surge charge in our clinic. There's a 3% fee. This is how I get that first notice so early to them. Hey, watch out for this. If you bring a credit card, you're going to get charged for that. So we have them sign our policies, and then they go in and put in their records. Originally, I had them doing it manually, but I made it an option for them to upload literally the chart for a patient in case my team was doing this. I also created one through my staff dashboard for them to be able to manage it. What was cool is that after we discovered this and we were working on the urgent care and the status board and getting them to call in and check in, we were kind of like, well, okay, what if we had a my chart? We were already texting pictures of patients to our clients, and we were kind of like, okay, that's great. Let's go ahead and develop a little more. So we created our pet portal. It was a section for us to be able to provide updates for our patients. As an ER doctor, what I found extremely exhausting as an overnight doctor is updating 10 patients at 6 a.m. in the morning and having a 10-minute conversation with them. That's an hour more of conversations. And some of those clients want to talk to you for 30 minutes. They're worried about their pet. What was great about the pet portal was I was able to reduce the conversations by creating this tool. So we made it so there's no sign up, there's no Google sign in, anything for these clients. We send them an access code and it reaches them their page in the pet portal. They can see updates posted in there. They can see records. They can see their billing. So we can put in an update for their invoice that happens every 24 hours. They know exactly where they are as far as their care is going. And they can see all the follow-up. For our side, we can go ahead and modify those things by going into this folder here and saying that intake, Tatiana, is really sweet.
So just for those folks that are like listening around, just to maybe play back what you're showing us in, because definitely we'll check out the video. You basically built this entire kind of client management layer to your practice that is configured for your specific workflows. That it sounds like you've added more and more layers over time, but handles everything from like the virtual queue to the patient records. I saw that it was extracting patient record information to be able to expedite kind of the form filling out. Your staff use it as a way to access and manage the queue. And this is something that you kind of took it upon yourself to build and create. Is that sort of summarize it?
Yeah, that summarizes it really well here. So you can see here, I have these patients here. If I can move them over to the triage, this is one of my latest tools that I kind of created after inspiration from Dr. Beth Davido over at Timberline. Thank you very much if she's listening to this. I stole her triage board and I incorporated it into our system. So now inside the hospital itself, you can see these patients. You can see how long they're in each stage of the the intake for these patients. You can see how long it took to get them into the system, how long it took for the patients to have their vitals, for to have those initial diagnostics pulled, how long the doctor is working with them, and then we can move them along the board. One thing I like too is that it gives more clarity to the owners. Why is it waiting 4 hours? Well, that's because we're treating 4 critical patients. 4 critical patients are receiving care in the hospital. These clients have a better understanding, and better yet, they're not waiting here in the hospital. I keep them at home. I'm like, okay, you just chill at home. You watch an episode of One Piece or something like that. Relax until we call you and it's your turn, because I don't want them waiting in a little room being angry about it. They don't know what's going on the floor of the hospital, which is also how it ties into being a transparent floor model. It really does help with those wait times. I think a lot of doctors get scared of that, but honestly, we do stuff in front of clients all the time.
So Sam, what's so funny is you're speaking about this in such an even-keeled, matter-of-the-fact way, when I think you've just demonstrated something that is a huge leap forward for your practice, that you built yourself, which is incredible. What I'd love for you to kind of share with our audience is, one, what is the day-to-day impact, like if you could quantify it, that this has in your practice, maybe in terms of efficiency and time saved, in terms of client satisfaction, and even like patient outcomes. If you have a feel for like the concrete delta in the real world that this is creating, that would be super interesting. And then two, would love to know maybe how long did this take you to build, if you could estimate, and then like how long would it take you to build it again, knowing what you know now?
I think that is some fun questions for you, and I think you're going to love the answers to them. So I'll get to the first question that you had, if I can recall it correctly, is that you're asking what was the real world impact that this had? And I can name the first one is those updates. I used to spend 10 plus minutes each client where I had a hospitalized patient that I managed talking to them, oftentimes more time to make sure that they understood what was happening with the patient. They understood the goals for their care, to understand where they were financially as far as their hospitalized patients go. And it would take away time from actually treating the patients. I remember being like, I need to go do this for this patient, but then thinking, no, I have 3 more clients I got to call. I'm going to be so tired at the end of my shift. And the physical impact was we became more efficient, having these updates, which can obviously have even more AI applied to them if you summarize what you're trying to say to the client and have it put your summaries in there. So you save a lot of time as far as doctor time. As far as patient impact, the patients get to see what's going on. My team takes pictures of the patients and write updates about the patient's care every 4 to 6 hours when they're hospitalized in here. And what we see is these clients who look at the pet portal up to 300 times. We can see, as the patients have been hospitalized for some time, how many times they actually access the pet portal. We have this access log, and every time they log in through their access code, we see how much impact that has. And that can change the way we're having a conversation. Maybe this is a family of people who are all looking at these updates. And so instead of calling 3 people or 2 people or multiple people, you're having one conversation all uploaded for them to see. So it makes the conversations more streamlined. Everybody has the same information. Sometimes you have an owner who's very anxious and they are able to be reassured by seeing these updates every couple of hours for their patient. They know the care that they're getting, and we absolutely see the impact in our Google reviews. People comment on it saying, oh my God, they have this pet portal. I've never seen that before. It's wonderful. And it provides a level of care that's excellent. As far as how did I make it? This is pretty fun. It started definitely a single process, not connected, as a pet portal. And I remember going to a professional. And I said to them, hey, I need an urgent care board, and I want to make a pet portal connected to it. And they were like, great, we'll work on this project. It's going to be $20,000. I was like, oh my God, $20,000. At this point, I was getting used to, working with Base 44 and some of these tools. And I was just like, you know what? I think for $20,000, I could probably work on it a little harder. So I gave it about a week's worth of work. And that's how long it took me to get the first edition of the pet portal. 1 week of working several hours throughout the day.
That's amazing. Charlie.
And I saved $20,000.
You want to share?
What was that?
Sam, yours kind of reminded me of like in the next degree of like when you can watch your Domino's pizza go through the process, and now all of a sudden you can see like, how can I know that my Domino's is now going through the oven, but I don't know that Fluffy just had a cysto and now is going into surgery or something? Like, that's awesome. That transparency, I think, probably means a lot to your pet parents. So that's really cool.
We definitely feel the impact. So it's something that I've really loved. Working with Base 44 has been really easy. I know that with all these tools, it's going to take practice. You're going to have to play with it. You're going to have to find the one that you like. For us, the Base 44 has worked really well. Glenn, I know you're going to love this. So sorry, I'm going to hijack it just to show you. But I've been working with this group called Veterinarian. They have the access to journals, to books. This is their product that they're putting out there. It's basically evidence-based clinical resource for people, free for veterinarians right now. So that's my little call out for them. They are working really hard, which I love this. So
yeah, I played around with that. They did a good job.
Good. Yeah. So I'm glad you've seen it before. It makes me feel like I'm on the right path. Good.
Barley, do you want to share a little bit about your approach with rounds, and whatever you're willing to screen share would be great.
Yeah. So I basically took my idea and I used the same language I used to Adam when I described it to him to try to get him to help me build it. And I talked to ChatGPT. I tried to talk about what the idea was, what the problem I was trying to actually solve for, who it was for, why the problem mattered, and if it thought it was a good idea, which is always a scary thing to ask a computer. From there, kind of developing kind of the MVP and what 10 things, that thing should have to actually be functional. And then using Moscow framework for the must have, should have, could have, won't have for now to figure out what I needed to prioritize for the build. So I kind of took it from ChatGPT and those ideas, asking it and helping me develop the prompts that I was then going to feed into Lovable, and as well as my kind of user experience that I developed with it. So then I took it over into Lovable. And to be fair, that was just the course that I had provided to me to try out. But I also really liked the name and the branding. So that is why I tried Lovable, if I'm honest. Let me just screen share here. Okay, this is not a plug from Aaron, but I do use Covet personally. If you want to throw a free month in there, Aaron, that would be great, but we love it. So what I then used to build out Rounds Vet was trying to figure out kind of what a landing page would look like, what information it needed to have, and then try to figure out how to integrate Stripe for payments in the future. Right now, it's kind of in a sandbox stage. These are all my friends, so they just let me use their faces to build out kind of my functional prototype for it. And then learning how to build the back end for it. Lovable has a really great system to do it, but learning, about Super Base and all those other things that I had never even heard of before. So how it works right now, I'm just clicking upload a consult for anyone who's not on visual. And then I go into my Covet, I copy and paste it into a text box. If it had speaker labels, it's even better. Aaron, if you could do that for me, that would be great. But it can usually do a pretty good job figuring out who said what, despite not having that. When you hit upload a consult, it's now analyzing it from the framework I've given it, and then it's going to spit out a consult report talking about a few things I did well. This was actually a case that I saw and kind of the quote that I said for understanding the client's story, building relationship, validating the client's efforts, and then the actual kind of quote that goes along with it, and navigating some options together and transparency around spectrum of care. Gives me a little communication scorecard. So I partially set an agenda for this appointment, my breakdown of open versus closed-ended questions, and my presence of empathy language, and then one area of focus. So it talks about what I could work on, what I said, and then maybe some options that I could have said instead. From there, I can monitor trends over time. So I found one thing that would be cool to look at is, how do those little things change, whether it was doing communication training or courses, or just as time has gone on. So those are the three things I'm focusing on now: agenda setting, open-ended questions, and empathy language. Spoiler to no one, vets are usually pretty darn empathetic. And then I can look through my consultations. I can also send my focus goal. So that'll give me more specific feedback on something I'm working on. And certainly right now, cost conversations is kind of the big thing in my world. What I've done from there, though, is I've then remixed that project for some different groups that I'm talking to that have their own communication structured framework. And then I'm being able to provide kind of pre and post training scorecards and data surrounding like how that communication training actually changed their in-appointment communication skills. That can then go look at client scorecards and satisfaction scorecards, as well as the actual individual vets themselves, but give some like concrete data to something that's otherwise a pretty kind of soft skill.
Carly, that is so interesting. I can see like what an incredible impact this has to have for you. One thing I'm curious about is, so we've seen, from a lot of the AI community, a ton of excitement around OpenClaw. We discussed it, I think, a couple shows back, and I think part of it is because OpenClaw is proactive instead of reactive, right? So the way Claude Code or Lovable or Replit or Codex will work is, you go into the Surface terminal or the app and you tell it to do something. And what people really love about OpenClaw, for all its virtues and vices, is it will actually like message you proactively. So what I'm wondering is the place I see this really taking off is if there is kind of a proactive component to it, where maybe people could get like a I don't know, the Slack message or an email, at regular intervals so that they could use the surfaces and kind of this machinery could be in the background. Have you thought of doing something like that? And then Erin, does Covet have an MCP? Like, would she be able to like wire and automate that up?
I think that the first part was for you, Carly.
I'll leave it for you first. I'll jump on it after, but I want to hear this.
Yeah. So I don't think that we have anything currently available, but it wouldn't be impossible to build that out. So I think it's a very real possibility. Yeah, Carly, go ahead. And then I've got a couple of questions for the group.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the proactive thing is hitting the nail on the head. I think right now you're analyzing transcript data, so it's something that's already happened, and then looking for the future. I mean, looking from, the sentiment analysis and all that stuff that can then be triggered with that data. But if you could have it in real time, be analyzing in real time, then I think it starts to be something really cool. If you can kind of adjust those conversations and prevent that angry client because you can adjust that conversation in real time, I think that's where the magic happens.
That's awesome. So one of the things that I was thinking about as all of you are going through this is you all seem to be very patient people. Like, this is not easy stuff, or at least it doesn't look that easy. And then you start talking about it, and none of you are software engineers. And yet all of you have created these like just beautiful projects. Can you just talk through how you think about that time? Because Carly, I know for you in particular, when we started off at the very beginning, the moment you started playing with some of these tools, you got really excited, right? You could see like the immediate effect of what you were doing. And I wonder if that's the same for all of you. It's just the like immediacy. And are we all just like dopamine addicts and we're just getting these like immediate responses and it just looks amazing? And is that what's happening here? So it seems like that's one of the pieces, right? It's just this idea that none of you are engineers, and yet you're able to build these amazing products because you've got a certain level of patience, but then it's being reinforced by what's happening. But all of you had something that you were trying to solve, some particular problem that you were trying to solve. So if you could just talk a little bit about your journey, that maybe that patience piece, having something in particular that you were trying to solve, and anything else that would be beneficial as people think through this, because there's so many people out there that just have no idea how easy this can be once you get onto that dopamine train. So I'd love to hear from you, your perspectives on that.
I would say start small, like have like a really small problem you're trying to solve that's going to have an immediate impact. So just one little thing that you're trying to fix, and work on that. And then if that works, you're going to get a lot of momentum to work on it again. Like when I started, it was like, I'll make one thing and I just want to get this one thing working. And then it's like, okay, that was good. And then the next time I have some time off, it's like, all right, I'm going to add on that. I'm going to add a new feature. And then you just keep kind of snowballing over time, where you started off with this like really, really simple workflow or really simple use case. And then over time, by building on it, you just eventually got to the point where you had something bigger. And there was definitely lots of failure, lots of dead ends, lots of frustration, lots of, hey, fix it. And then it's not fixed. And then you're like, all right, it's not fixed, fix it. And then it's learning and iterating, and then eventually getting to the point where you're like, okay, that doesn't work. I have to do these other, try something new, give the LLM some new context, review the logs, go through more official debugging stuff. And then you're also learning a whole new skill set of software engineering and how the computer thinks and how code works and how all of that plays together. And like eventually you get to the point where you're hitting the stop button because you're like, I know you're going to mess this up. I'm going to stop you now, and I'm going to tell you the right thing to do. So slow, steady progress. Like there'll be some like quick, easy wins at the beginning, and then you can just build off those.
I have like 18 variations of my original prompt, just a lot of versions over time. I completely agree. It's build and build and build. So,
and I think the first time that you can actually use it for yourself, and it's like oh, this actually, I think about the problem for everyone else, but just for a second, I think small and I think about the problem for me right now. And for me, it was going back into an exam room and then just uploading all of my consults and watching what would happen when I asked a few friends to upload their consults. I asked them to give me 5, and I found them continuing to do it, which was cool. And then the other part that I saw was seeing what they used and what they didn't. So there was at one point like a little almost like journal that you kind of wrote a couple notes for yourself from each appointment. And I saw myself included, we're not filling that out. Like there was not enough time and I was not getting enough value out of that to actually do it. So like get rid of that thing that doesn't work and then kind of keep pivoting and finding that path moving forward.
I was mourned my little teletriage project I had. It never took off. Nobody ever wanted to use it. And I was so sad. I was like, oh, this is a great idea. People are coming from 2 hours away. We'll make a triage for them. We'll talk to them before they ever get here. Nah, never happened. They just came here.
Can you talk a little bit about how your team has reacted, or as you sort of bringing this to real users? I can, as somebody who's built technology for veterinary teams before, there's different levels of adoption of tools. And I wonder if that adoption curve or that engagement looks different in your teams when kind of the solution is coming from inside the house, so to speak. Are they more tolerant? Do they give you more feedback? Do they try to like keep you happy and not give you the tough lessons? What does that look like as you've kind of brought this to real people who maybe have different levels of expectation, different adoption personalities?
There was a lot of skepticism from my wife. She was like, what makes you
about your tool, right? Not about you, just about your
about the building. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, what makes you think you should be the one doing this? Or like, why? And it's like, well, you're trying to build something that's unique for your specific workflow, or like in Sam's case with his amazing project, like for his specific hospital, or for Carly's passion project for improving communication. Like you're trying to do something that, like Sam said, no one's going to drop 20 grand on to build it. You're trying to build something that is immediately useful for.
So I think we should go around the room and offer the key takeaway that everyone would like for our audience to walk away thinking about. Let's Aaron, let's start with you.
I think for me, the biggest thing is that you just ask it what it needs to ask you in order to get going. Like, you don't need to know anything about it. You can just say, I've got this vague idea, help me turn it into something that's going to be an actual project, right? So for me, seeing all of you do this and seeing each one of you have these like beautiful projects. So if all of you are listening to this, like, please go check out the video, because all of you have these amazing projects that you've built that are visually appealing, not just like functional, but also visually appealing. And all of that is because you just started off with some basic questions and you just learned from it as you were building through. So that was just amazing to see.
I think I'm gonna just mention no better time than now. That's kind of been my whole philosophy from even the start. When I was first trying to decide about opening Rogue Valley Veterinary Emergency, I was kind of deciding, do I go work at another corporate hospital? Do I do more relief? Do I go do this? And I was just saying to myself, it's never going to get easier. It's never going to get easier to open a clinic. It's never going to get easier to create one of these tools. Just start. So I really encourage just starting it.
I would say not having your knowledge or lack thereof of all the different language models and all the different products that are available be a reason that you slow down or don't start to begin with. I think focusing on one and trying it out and then playing with a different one and a different one, it kind of becomes addicting. But I think just sticking into one or two, I guess I'm also brainstorming with my, Claude or chat, and then going into Lovable to actually build that kind of prototype and functional thing out. But I didn't know what my language or what my AI was using in the background. And I know at one point I chose it, but I couldn't remember. It's Gemini 3 Flash, apparently. And I asked why I used that. And they said, because you wanted it because it was most cost effective. Thank you. Lovable for that. But it was like, do you want to use this one or this one or this one, or try these out? So it's great. You can learn as you go and you can build something. And then if that's not giving you the output you want, you can try something else and plug those things in. But not knowing what all of them are shouldn't be a reason that you don't build it. So build the, for yourself, and then get to play around as you go and know that it can continue to iterate. And even if like the final idea is so big and you can't quite grasp your mind about how you build that, as Glenn said, like start small, get those quick wins, be able to share with people, watch them use it. And just get going. It's addicting and it's really fun.
Yeah, just start, pick something, whether that's Notebook LM or Replit or Lovable Base 44. Just go on there. They usually have a free tier as well, so you don't even have to spend any money to get started. Plan extensively, so like use your ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude to do the planning, to go through it. Like Aaron said, interview you, like have it ask you those questions and really fine tune your idea, and just build something small, like be amazed that you did something, that you built it, and then iterate from there. And you may find you don't need to know all the technical stuff, or you may find that you actually really like that and you want to kind of learn more about how software is made and how it's engineered and how it's upkept and deployed, and you can kind of do whatever you want with it. And think of the like subscriptions as kind of your tuition for this like new education you're taking on, because it's going to do work for you once you figure out how to use it. So you instantly get that return, but you're also just learning this completely new skill set, and it's going to take time. It's going to take reps to figure out what it can do, what it can't, where the limitations are, and the models just keep getting better, and then you get to be amazed all over again.
It's
Did Adam tell you the part about the subscriptions being part of your education? Did he tell you to say that to?
Well, it's part of the
Flight or
same
anything?
podcast. That's
this is the School of AI next. The one thing I was going to add to this kind of was touched on a little bit, but maybe to be more explicit, like solve a problem that you care about solving. Like I think one of the blockers that I've seen is
like something you have
sometimes-
unique context for.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Like the amount of people that sort of say like, I don't know what idea I should build, that, you know, people is going to lay with other people. Like it's kind of just bullshit. Just solve something that is giving you daily frustration, where you know what good looks like, that you're going to be motivated to solve. And what you sort of realize, especially if you're in clinical practice, is the problems that you're solving are going to be the same problems that other clinicians have. But I really think, you know, and you touched on this a little bit, Sam, where historically software has been generic, it's been expensive, you couldn't talk to it to make it better, and it didn't uniquely fit to your circumstances in the way that really brought team buy-in. And now in each of your individual kind of lives and communities, you are effectively the builder. And I think the world is going to be a lot better for veterinarians when they're at the center of creating the solutions that them and their peers are going to use. And I think if you can develop this mentality where, and I'm sure each of you now look at like your day-to-day life through this lens, it's like, if I have a problem, like, can I build a fix for that myself, as opposed to I'm just going to live with this compounding, you know, frustration or angst or anger. It's like, no. I'm the builder now. You're right. It's like the,
Get me, I'm the builder now. Yeah, I got you. Don't worry.
You got a new source of frustration trying to debug all that code.
Exactly. But it makes you have at least empathy then for if you are going to be paying people for software, you're going to be paying developers, you can interact from a place of more information symmetry. And I just think that there's about to be an explosion of veterinarians who are going to start to do the sorts of things that you have already been doing. So that was a big takeaway for me, where I just think if you can really focus on something that's directly in front of you, that you know what good looks like, that you think that you can make a difference on, it gets back to what Glenn was saying about focusing on a problem that you really care about yourself and focusing and getting one thing to completion. I think that's a huge takeaway for this group, as opposed to like waiting for the perfect idea, because the perfect idea is the thing on your to-do list that you hate doing.
Adam, I think you nailed it. I think it's knowing what good looks like. Right. I think it's like when you're close enough to a problem, your instincts would tell you like when it's effectively solved or above some threshold. And that's really what you need to do in order to build something valuable. So I think like the key takeaways for me, I agree. I think there's going to be an explosion. I would imagine that it's starting to happen right now. Like I'm just so impressed by all of you, what you're building, that you didn't wait for permission to do something incredible. You're actively, building so it's something that disrupts ancient workflows, older technologies, companies that charge, hundreds of dollars, if not thousands per month to, practices that you're effectively like solving better, and it's custom fit for your needs. I think like to me, the big takeaways are one, like this is we're at such a unique time where there's this fundamentally new skill. And I think the best term for it is agentic engineering. And the frontier of it, it's whoever has, like, there's only a few months of the frontier expertise, right? Like nobody is crazy far ahead. Even, co-founder of OpenAI, Andre Karpathy, said, like, he still feels like he's kind of grappling with where the frontier is. And so I think there's just a tremendous economic opportunity to be building things when you really do understand a unique problem space. But there's a huge opportunity also if you're not thinking at that scale just for your practice. Like all of you proved that out here today. And I think, like, if I can have any tips is, somebody who's, I mean, honestly, I live in Quad Code 10 hours a day now. I have terminal going right now. I'll admit to all of you, I've got a project that I think is just going to totally change the way marketing happens in this industry. And the nice thing is you can let it run while you're doing podcasts. Hopefully it doesn't crash my computer again, though. I think there are two things that I've learned that can be quite helpful for every builder out there. The first one is that not only is it great to really specialize in terms of you, the person, what's the problem I'm trying to solve, but you can actually have agents that specialize too. So if you use Claude Code, you shouldn't just use the same cold start every single time where you're asking Claude to go solve this problem in your code base. You can build a custom agent that learns your code base over time, right? So say I need to figure out, like, what kind of training I'm going to onboard you as an agent into my fleet, right? And Aaron, I think you had such a nice way of framing this. Like, ask it what you don't know, right? Like, not even jumping to, like, what should the plan be? It's the precursor. Like, what do I really need to think through in order to even get to the point to ask you for a plan? And have it go deep in what I have done I have like 12 different custom agents now. And, one of them is my essentially like testing agent. And so the archetype for that agent I have is a guy by the name of Kent Beck, who was the creator of something called test-driven development. And so what I had that agent do is read every single fucking piece of code that Kent Beck ever published, for the public to see. Like, and his GitHub repo has everything, right? And so you can teach these dozen of them. Each of them does something unique and different. So you can teach these agents to specialize. And the power of not only having opinionated agents to do some specific task within your repos, but having them have the actual like training and expertise to be able to come across novel problems and then solve them. I mean, honestly, this will take you from building something interesting to you can ship more than most companies do now very quickly. The other tip I would give, the audience is you should have a compounding mechanism here as well. So if you don't, you're just going to have to. I mean, I've sworn at Claude Code so many times. Honestly, I did it last night, so I'm certainly not perfect. I'll probably show of hands here, who has said, why the fuck did you do that to, your command line? I say it maybe once every other day. Have a compounding mechanism, give it some vehicle to learn your code base over time, learn what works and what doesn't. Say, like, codify this lesson. What's the best way to codify this lesson so that I don't have to keep re-explaining myself to you fucking idiot, right? So, like, that's a much nicer way than to just have this, like, weird abusive relationship that some of us struggle with. The last thing I'd leave the audience with is just, this is so fun. I am honestly having more fun than I've ever had. Like, it reminds me of the same, and for better or worse, my lovely fiance might not love this all the time. It's the same level of addictive quality that I had when I was like a teenager playing computer games, where I just wanted to like lock myself in a room for 12 hours and play World of Warcraft. Like, it's just absolutely wild, the rush that it is to be building valuable and interesting things. So this has been an incredible discussion. We're going to be doing more of these, but Sam, Carly, William, like, thank you for sharing your expertise, for sharing what it is that you're building, for inspiring the rest of us that we don't need to wait for permission to build important things. So that'll do it for us for the Veterinary Daily Brief for this episode. This is Adam, Aaron, Carly, William, and Sam signing off. Looking forward to see what you all build. Thanks all.